Hey everybody, welcome in to the Tuesday Waiver Wire live stream here at youtube.com/FantasyPros. I'm Dan Harris, host of the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast and the Betting Pros NFL Podcast. If you come to this live stream often, you usually see me and Kyle Yates. Unfortunately, Yates was not able to make it today, so it is just going to be me doing it solo. Hopefully everything's going well. I know I did this one time before and there were some issues going on with technical stuff, but I'm hopeful that right now everything is going well. So here's what we're going to do today. We are going to talk about our top waiver wire pickups of the week. Then I'm going to answer a ton of questions. So if you are here, if you are answering questions, if you are asking questions, just ask them. Ask them. My producer is going to keep track of us going on. He will let me know. Give me a whole bunch of questions, which I will get to. So what have we done so far this week? I have done a podcast already. I have done a waiver wire podcast with Tags and Yates, so you know my thoughts on a lot of guys. We have a waiver wire video that's out right now. We also gave my thoughts on various waiver wire pickups. So I'm not going to spend an abundance of time going through them each and every week for each and every pickup right now. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a little bit of an update and a little bit of a rundown just in case you haven't caught either our podcast or my waiver wire video. And again, next thing I'm going to do is get to all your questions. So just keep them coming. Even if you ask them right now, I promise my producer, who is incredible, by the way, which I'm telling him that so he doesn't cut me off too early, that we can make sure that I get to as many as possible, and I will try to fly through them when I get there later. Keep them to waiver wire or rest of season rankings questions if you can. I have not yet done my week 10 rankings. So if you ask a question about that, I will try to give you something with it, but I probably won't have quite as detailed information as I would otherwise give you, and you can check out the Start Sit live stream on Thursday. So let's get to it. Okay, so let's start at running back, and then I'm going to go to wide receiver. Then I'm just going to go through everything overall. My top running back pickup is actually this week, and it's a very, very small difference between the top few, is Duke Johnson. Now, why is it Duke Johnson? We don't know necessarily whether David Johnson is going to play next week. David Johnson left the game early this past week against Jacksonville with a concussion. We have not heard anything on David Johnson. I know that's actually a couple of questions that we've got here already. We don't know anything about David Johnson. We have not heard anything. We heard David Montgomery went into the concussion protocol. We have not yet heard anything on David Johnson. So why is he the top pickup? Two reasons. One, to be clear, it is a 1A, 1B situation, really 1C almost, with the top three of Duke Johnson, Jordan Wilkins, and J.D. McKissic. They're all like 8% of your fab type guys. I don't have a strong preference for Duke Johnson. But Duke Johnson is the one who offers by far the most upside if David Johnson is out this week. I'm not going to call him a week winner, but you saw what happens. He gets all of the running back touches if something happens to David Johnson. So if that happens this weekend against Cleveland, I mean, even when he wasn't that productive, even when he didn't have a great yards per carry or anything like that, I think it was only 41 yards that he gained on the ground, he still found the end zone. He still added 32 yards receiving through the air. He's a guy who's going to be a huge difference maker. I don't think you're going to be able to say the same thing about Jordan Wilkins or about J.D. McKissic this week, and those are the next guys. So for me, Duke Johnson, he might not be worth anything this week. Again, this is an 8% of your fab type of guy. This is not a below-the-budget type of guy. It's not a below-the-budget type of week. But for me, Johnson is the guy who I would be looking to pick up first of running backs because I do think that he at least offers the potential to be a guy who's essentially going to keep you competitive in a week. Second for me, and again, 1A, 1B, 1C, is Jordan Wilkins for the running back. You listen to Tags. Tags is a brilliant guy, fantastic analyst. Tags has been much higher on Wilkins for the last couple of weeks than I am. I think the Colts know that their way to the playoffs, their way to success in the playoffs is not through Jordan Wilkins. Okay? This is not a Raheem Mostert situation in my mind, which is the way Tag sort of labeled it. Raheem Mostert may have been a journeyman and then found his calling in San Francisco last year, but this is not a different team. Wilkins has been with the Colts for the last, 2 seasons before this. They know what they have in him. They have not wanted to give him the workload. They had Marlon Mack as the guy who was in front of him. This is not as if there was this insurmountable obstacle put in front of Jordan Wilkins that didn't allow him to start. There is a reason. Now, Jonathan Taylor has not looked overly impressive. I'm not going to lie about that. He does look at many times like he is running into the back of his offensive lineman, and he fumbled in this past game. And that, given his fumbling problems in college, that's really scary. But I do think that they were going to be giving Jonathan Taylor the workload against the Ravens, and he looked pretty good. Okay, he looked like he was running well. Of course, he scored the short touchdown where he jumped over the line. So I think there's every reason to think that Jonathan Taylor is at least going to be as involved as Wilkins, if not even more involved going forward, which is kind of what I expect. I expect them to eventually lean into him. So for me, absent the Taylor injury, Wilkins just isn't a guy who you're going to feel comfortable relying on. And last week I said I would have rather picked up Gus Edwards instead of Jordan Wilkins because I would have ranked Edwards higher than Wilkins last week, which I did, and that did work out. This week I have Wilkins as a better pickup than Edwards, but still, I think that Wilkins is just not going to be a guy who you can rely on, each and every week unless something happens to Taylor. That's why he's number 2. Next is J.D. McKissic, and again, this is really the end of the running backs that you really, really want to target. J.D. McKissic got 14 targets and caught 9 of them against the Giants this past week. They play Detroit this week. He'll probably be pretty involved then, but it's probably at the same point not going to be really a negative game script, though you could have thought the same thing about the Giants. So you're not going to look at him as somebody who is basically going to be getting the same targets as a receiver in every single game, but he has been fairly involved in the passing game, and he now has Alex Smith as his quarterback. Alex Smith did not seem to have any interest in throwing the ball downfield, and what are you going to want to say? The guy is not nearly as mobile as he used to be. He's taken a bunch of punishment, of course, if you watch that documentary. So you can understand there's going to be a lot of short passes. I just think it's going to be, more for Antonio Gibson and McKissic to an extent, but not how we saw in this past game. So McKissic is really a guy who, if you've got a really good team and you're just sort of lacking at that second running back spot, or you're lacking at that flex spot, and you just need somebody who's going to give you fairly consistent points this week, McKissic is your guy that you can pick up. But he lacks the upside of Duke Johnson if anything happens to David. And Jordan Wilkins is also somebody who, again, he at least is going to factor in. It's a great schedule for Indianapolis going forward. Great for running back. So if something happened to Taylor, or if Taylor fumbled again, or, something like that, then maybe Wilkins could have, exceptional value. So both those guys come in slightly ahead of McKissic, but they're all 8%. I'm going to run through a couple other guys on my running back list because you might be in deeper leagues. Ryan Nall. Now, Dave Montgomery is in the concussion protocol, and Nall did score a touchdown this past week, but at tags on the waiver wire show called him Ryan Nah. It's kind of where I'm at. I would pick him up if you need a running back. Beggars can't be choosers. You do what you got to do. But he's not somebody who I'm really I don't think that if Montgomery is out, Ryan Nall against Minnesota is really somebody who's going to necessarily, make a huge difference. Now, he might, so he's on the pickup list, but not crazy. Tony Pollard, he's on a bye, so you don't probably have the room necessarily to pick him up. If you do, though, he's a good stash candidate. He was the premier handcuff, right, behind the Dallas offensive line if anything happened to Zeke. Well, that obviously fell down a little bit since the offense doesn't look anywhere close to what it used to without Dak Prescott. But at the same time, it looked at least quasi-competent now that you got Ben DiNucci out of there. And again, you also have Zeke actually kind of battling an injury. He worked through it. He played pretty well against Pittsburgh, but he does have the hamstring injury. So it is something where Pollard again enters that high-end handcuff, and all of those guys need to be owned at this point, especially if you're looking likely for the playoffs. That's what you need to be doing right now. Stash your bench with non-stop high-end handcuffs, because if somebody gets injured, they could be a league winner. Next up is Devontae Booker, and you want to listen to a podcast that's going to drop later today about rest of season rankings. We did it, Yates and I did it with Brandon Funston, and a guy who I listed him as a sell-high candidate is Josh Jacobs. Again, Josh Jacobs is still basically a top 10 running back for me. But you can't deny that Devontae Booker looked pretty good in this past game against the Chargers. Looked probably more explosive than Jacobs, who is battling through a knee injury. So Booker kind of gets this dual sort of positive value in being a high-end handcuff. And he's also somebody who is getting some independent value because he is getting, 8-10 carries? I think you're going to be able to look at that going forward. Next up is Gus Edwards, who, again, is another guy. We don't know about Mark Ingram at this point, okay? If Mark Ingram is out, Edwards, again, is going to be a guy who you can just kind of play. He's not exciting, but he does get the goal line work. The most important thing was that he fumbled near the goal line in this past game against Indianapolis. He then later got the goal line touches and scored the touchdown. So that's a huge, huge sign that they are not going to go away from him, even if there is trouble, so long as there's not Mark Ingram. If Mark Ingram plays, which right now kind of think that he will against New England, then it's not something where I really want to go near anybody in that backfield. But monitor Ingram. If it doesn't look great, Edwards is a guy you can probably get in there as a flex. Other running backs this week, Kalen Ballage, he's been moved down to the practice squad. You assume that means good news for Troymaine Pope, or maybe Justin Jackson isn't as hurt. So keep your eye on Ballage. You can pick him up for something minor, but it's not really something that you're going after as much as you might have earlier. I mentioned him on the waiver wire video. We mentioned him on the podcast. Once he's been put back to the practice squad, that certainly takes the shine off Ballage. Cam Akers, again, more of a long-term play, not somebody who I'm really all that excited about picking up at the moment, because I think you need an injury to one of Darrell Henderson or Malcolm Brown for him to have any value whatsoever. And so long as there is no injury, and again, Darrell Henderson hurt his thigh in this last game, but he's also got a bye to recover from it. So I assume he's going to be fine, and therefore Cam Akers probably won't have value. So not somebody who I'm really trying to get to if I can. The Miami running backs, Salvon Ahmed and Matt Breida, I don't know, man. I just don't really want the Miami running back situation. You can add them. I mean, we don't know if Breida is going to be able to play. We don't know exactly what's going to happen with Ahmed. We do know that, as long as Gaskin is out, which again might be for as little as 2 more games, that Jordan Howard is going to get the goal line work, and he is going to have, 1 yard per carry, but be able to find the end zone. So without the goal line work, that's really something that I don't think you can rely on either Dolphin running back, no matter what. Others are Joshua Kelly, who, again, if they went to Kalen Ballage, the Chargers, over Joshua Kelly, when are we ever going to go to Joshua Kelly? When is that ever going to happen? Never. So at this point, Joshua Kelly is like a very, very low-end pickup at running back. So there you have it. You've really got the top 3. Duke Johnson, who is my favorite, Jordan Wilkins, and J.D. McKissic. Neither one of them is significantly above the other, and they're all 8% of fab type guys. But those are the 3 top pickups at running back right now. So that's where we are. Let's get to wide receiver here. Before we do, I hope you are subscribed to our YouTube channel. If you're watching this, again, obviously, youtube.com/FantasyPros. If you're not, go ahead and click the subscribe button. Helps us out, shows that you support the show. Click the notification button. You'll get notified anytime we go live, anytime we have a new video. And also, if you like this video, give a little thumbs up. Lets our bosses know that, hey, keep doing these live streams. We like them, even though we're in week 10 already. Wait till you guys, if you are watching this, you are in contention in week 10. You are having a successful fantasy season. I am personally extremely proud of you. So way to go. Let's get to wide receiver, because there are some intriguing options going on right now at wide receiver, including your number 1 pickup of the week. That's Jalen Reagor to me. Now, there is some debate about whether Reagor should be the number 1, because you've got 2 other really intriguing options this week in Curtis Samuel and Jacoby Myers, who we saw last night. Reagor is the number 1 to me for a couple of reasons. One, I think he's the most talented of all those guys. I mean, he was really exciting coming out of college. You thought he could have a role right out of the gate. Then he suffered through an injury, came back earlier, then he had the thumb injury, and he's basically been out. His first game back, which he came back a little earlier than expected, he caught the touchdown, wasn't overly involved. I believe he had 16 yards receiving. He caught the 2-point conversion as well. Now with a bye week, fully healthy, they're ready to immerse him in the offense. And again, this is something where Fulgham is legit, okay? He's got his role. I don't know about Alshon Jeffrey. I recommended Alshon Jeffrey as a pickup like 85 weeks in a row. We're not doing it right now. But without Deshaun Jackson, Jalen Reagor is definitely going to have a role in this offense. You've probably got Dallas Goedert, but not Zach Ertz yet, ready to come back. So Reagor is a guy who you want to start each and every week as a wide receiver 3, and there's very little risk in that. Carson Wentz is going to continue to throw like a madman, so get Reagor on your team. He can be a guy you can have as a wide receiver 3. With that said, 12%. Okay, that's my recommended fab budget bid for Jalen Reagor at this point, because this is, again, wide receiver every week. Every week there's something at wide receiver that you can pick up to get you by, whether it's Cole Beasley. Most weeks I did. Last week somebody dropped John Brown, which I understood, but we picked him up. It was a pretty solid start. You can get by most weeks going week to week with receiver. So absent something where, kind of a wide receiver handcuff where it opens up a huge opportunity for somebody, it's not a position that you really want to spend too much of your fab budget on. So with that said, Reagor is the number one overall pickup and the number one wide receiver pickup this week, but it's just 12% of your budget. Now below that is Curtis Samuel, and right behind him is Jacoby Myers for me. Again, these three guys, I believe, are all in my top 5 pickups of the week. Right, my top 5 for the week are Jalen Reagor, Duke Johnson Jr., Jordan Wilkins, Curtis Samuel, and Jacoby Myers. So these are really the guys you want to be thinking about. Samuel, he's just getting involved. That's all that is to it. He caught all 9 of his targets for over 100 yards and the touchdown. He's also insanely efficient. You're not supposed to catch 38 of your 43 targets. You're just not. So it's not like they're just targeting him near the line of scrimmage either, by the way. They're pushing it downfield occasionally with him. The other thing is that he always is good for a couple of rush attempts, and that's including around the goal line. I mean, the last couple of games, you've been within the 15. He has gotten the rush attempts, one of which he converted for a touchdown. You've also probably got Christian McCaffrey, who's going to be most likely out this weekend against the Bucs. Now, it's not exactly a great matchup if you're looking at how many rushing yards Curtis Samuel can gain, because it's the Bucs. They're also probably going to be pretty pissed, if I can be frank, because they were completely embarrassed on national TV. So I wouldn't really want to be the Panthers right now. But regardless, Samuel is offering this great floor where he is heavily involved. Now, I don't prefer him to DJ Moore. That's actually been a question that I've gotten a lot. I don't prefer him to DJ Moore rest of season. But I do think that he is somebody who you can start fairly reliable in more of that flex range. He still falls right now outside of the wide receiver 3 range, although after this I am going to update my rest of season rankings. So we'll check in there. Right behind that is Jacoby Myers. Now Myers, boy, he was awesome. He was awesome yesterday. I believe he had 14 targets, 12 catches, and 169 yards, if memory serves. Couple of things. One, it's the Jets, okay? Legitimately, you go grab a football, grab your buddy, run a couple of routes. Sorry, Tags yells at me. Drop a couple of routes on your hand, make it happen. You could complete 60% of your passes pretty easily. They have a terrible secondary. They don't get a ton of pressure. So the fact that Myers had a huge game, don't go expecting this going forward, but he had 10 targets the week before. If you listen to our podcast or if you watched our video a couple of weeks ago, Derek Brown of Fade the Noise, kudos to him. He loved them. He loved Myers. Myers was his number 1. He was like my number 8. He was like tagged as number 9 or something like that. He loved Myers. He said Myers should be your pickup. I don't think you can rely on this each and every week. And of course, they are playing Baltimore, okay? It's not a great matchup, certainly, for wide receivers, just generally speaking, assuming that Humphrey is back to full health anyway. But their secondary is very solid. They're going to be ready to go in this game. There's a short week for New England. So, somebody who you're going to start this week, my guess is that Myers is probably going to rank behind Samuel even coming into this week. But still, given the volume, given how well he's produced, he is somebody who you're going to want to pick up generally. Now, let's talk about a couple of other wide receivers, because there are some guys who you can get away with. You might be in really deep leagues. These guys may be rostered already. Start with Nelson Agholor. Nelson Agholor, if you take away the wind game that the Raiders played against Cleveland, which again, that was like super wind. That's the one thing that's going to affect the way you're able to pass is the wind. That's when you really downgrade players. He was completely out of that game, as were most, Raiders pass catchers. But other than that, he scored a touchdown in 4 straight games. He's not getting the target volume. That is worrisome because really you follow the targets. It's an old adage. It's oversimplification, but you follow the targets. Agholor doesn't get that many targets, not enough to feel safe. But he is finding the end zone, and sometimes production just kind of matters. Now, he's not somebody who you want to go out and spend more than at maximum 5%, more like 3% of your fab budget on him. But he is somebody who, if you're in desperate need of a wide receiver, he can be someone who can be picked up. He's in the same range as a bunch of these guys that we're going to discuss right now. Tim Patrick. Tim Patrick returned. Tags and I have yelled about Tim Patrick all season long. okay, because he just doesn't want anything to do with Patrick for the most part, until now coming into this week where he seems to recognize that after coming back from injury, he's somebody who fantasy managers might want to pick up. Patrick, again, scored a touchdown, saw the targets in this past game. The issue for Patrick is that Jerry Jeudy, in Patrick's absence, has really emerged now. Tags has also pointed out he's not just running routes out of the slot, which kind of limited him. You would see Jeudy would get fewer snaps than the other wide receivers in Denver. Instead, Jeudy is basically playing all the snaps, and he's playing on the outside as well. So that is just going to cap Patrick's long-term viability as a fantasy option right there. Jeudy is the wide receiver that you want to roster in Denver. And again, they have Las Vegas this weekend. So it's a pretty decent matchup for basically anybody on Denver. But it's still not somebody who you want to go crazy over it. A low-end kind of flex play like Aguilar, who you can put in there if you really need somebody, but there's not a ton of upside. Nor is there all that much upside with Michael Pittman Jr., who's another guy who you can pick up. Remember, they play Thursday here against Tennessee. Now, the Tennessee secondary is getting a little healthier here. Dory Jackson's back. So, this is not... You don't ever want to attack, let's just say this, the Indianapolis passing game. It's definitely not something that I want Phillip Rivers throwing the ball, and this is... I want to get anybody who's going to get a part of that. It's like the opposite of that. If there is somebody, though, it is Pittman, okay, who has come back after his injury because he's a physical freak, and he's able to be that threat in the red zone near the goal line. Now, we haven't seen that all that much right now, and the Colts have gotten either kind of basic, where they're just running, or they're doing the Trey Burton Wildcat craziness that they like to do up near the goal line. But Pittman has the potential, at least, given Hilton's injury, and Hilton may play on Thursday, but Pittman is a guy who you can get out there and maybe play as a flex, and he's more of a long-term play than a short-term play. But if you're desperate for this week against Tennessee, you could roll him out there. A couple other guys. Darnell Mooney. Look, Minnesota's secondary, it's not good. It's injured. It's young. There's nothing good about it. It's a Monday night game. They're probably going to come out firing. They throw the ball a ton, way too much, in my humble opinion. But there may be no David Montgomery in this game. So it is something where you're going to want to think about, do I want a piece of the passing game? Allen Robinson is obviously the one that you want. But it's Mooney and not Anthony Miller, to my great chagrin, who is the second guy who you want when you're talking about Chicago wide receivers. He's getting a pretty consistent target volume. He's producing, not high-end numbers, but solid, like pretty decent floor numbers. And at this point, if you're struggling a wide receiver, you could do worse than that. Next up is Brashad Perriman, but he's on a bye this week, so not exactly somebody who you're running out to get, but he did catch the 2 touchdowns last night. And remember, he was somebody who, in the beginning of the season, fantasy managers were kind of quasi-excited about. I mean, he was somebody who we thought would be the wide receiver 1, necessarily, in for the New York Jets. And again, if he is fully healthy, you saw what he did at the end of the year last year with Tampa Bay. He is talented. He could be somebody who could provide decent value going forward. Again, on a bye, it's a little tough to really trust somebody like that. Other than that, let's talk about Danny Amendola. I'm going to assume that Kenny Golladay is going to be out this week against Washington. I mean, Amendola is unexciting, but he gets the targets. So he is somebody who you can pick up if you're desperate, especially in a PPR league. KJ Hamler against Las Vegas. Again, like Tim Patrick, there is something where if Drew Lock is going to throw as much as he's going to throw, then these guys are going to have value, everybody there. But it's really Jeudy is the only guy who I think you can consistently roll out there. Patrick is next, then Hamler. But it was good to see Hamler get more involved. After that, it's Anthony Miller. Again, getting more involved now. Great matchup against Minnesota, but it's Mooney. Mooney is the guy you want to target in Chicago. But again, if you're absolutely desperate, you can go with Miller. After that, MVS. Look, he had a great game on Thursday night against San Francisco. But Allen Lazard is about to be back. And again, MVS, as much as he had that huge game, he dropped a pass early on. He's just not going to develop into this reliable guy. He's going to be a completely boomer bust, maybe wide receiver 4, more like a wide receiver 5. So not somebody really to trust. After that, Alshon Jeffrey. I've recommended Alshon Jeffrey 50,000 times, so I'm not going to do it again right now. But, there is a universe where Alshon Jeffrey can produce. If he can stay completely healthy, if Carson Wentz picks up his performance a little better, then you could see Fulgham, you could see Goddard, you could see Rager, and you could see Jeffrey. But for now, a very low-end wide receiver. My bad for recommending picking him up all those weeks. All right, let's get to quarterback. Let's get to tight end. These are going to be much quicker because we don't need to worry too much about picking him up. And then we're going to bang out some questions. Just rapid fire as much as I possibly can, okay? For quarterback this week, there isn't great options out there. Tags and Yates talked about Baker Mayfield. Now, Baker's on the COVID list, but again, this does not sound like he has tested positive. He is just, in the Ben Roethlisberger situation, Matthew Stafford situation from last week, it sounds like all they need to do is test negative and they'll be good to go. So I'm going to assume Baker Mayfield's going to play here against Houston. Look, I like Jake Luton. I hope he has a nice career, but the fact that Jake Luton tore up the Texans is much more to do about the Texans defense than it does about Jake Luton. So Baker Mayfield, certainly somebody who you can start. Andrew Luck against Las Vegas. Luck is not playing particularly well. He's been lucky enough to have his team fall behind, and it could happen again with Las Vegas. They're an underrated offense. They are able to move the ball. So it is something where you could go with Lock if you absolutely wanted to, but these guys are going to be low-end streaming options. If I'm picking up a quarterback, and I don't desperately need one for this week, but maybe even if I did, it would be Tua Tagovailoa, okay? Tua, I was, with what they look like against the Rams, and the Rams are a very good defense, I was not optimistic on Tua's outlook last week against Arizona, but the Dolphins adjusted. Kudos to the coaching staff, okay? They got him on the run a little bit where he was able to do some stuff. They got him out of the pocket. I think he threw on 30, 35 yards rushing. That's something that, if you can do that as a quarterback, that's going to offer you this pretty artificially high floor. And the Chargers give up a lot of points to quarterback. So it is something where Tua, short term, I'd be good with starting him this week over Baker. Long term, it is something where I'm going to be looking at him for sure. So if you can avoid, if you don't absolutely need somebody for this week, I would go ahead and get Tua. But, it's not a huge difference between him and Baker for me. So even for this week. So I would be fine to go with them there. Finally, Nick Foles. It's Minnesota. They're terrible and they throw a lot and they may not have their running back. So it is something where you can think about picking up Nick Foles, but he's fourth on my priority list for quarterbacks. For a tight end, number one with a bullet is Austin Hooper. I completely understand why fantasy managers moved on from Austin Hooper. He was out a couple of weeks with the appendectomy. He had the bye week. Totally fine. But Hooper's target share had gone way up over the last 3 games, and especially without Odell Beckham Jr., he's just somebody who, is, I hesitate to call him a reliable tight end because there's like 2 guys who might fit that bill, and they're Travis Kelce and Darren Waller. But he's going to be one of the ones who, if you roster him, you're probably going to be starting him every week just because he's going to get the targets in a Kevin Stefanski-led offense, which is really where you want to go for tight end. So Hooper is your number one guy. Absolutely. Again, it's a 5% type bid because I do think you can get by with streaming a tight end. But he is somebody who you do kind of want to go after if you are struggling in that position. He's the one guy who stands above the rest. After that, Jimmy Graham, Trey Burton, Jordan Reed. Graham finds his way into touchdowns. He's a threat around the end zone. He's still that big-bodied wide receiver, so he's somebody who you can target. He had a nice game this past one, and again, Minnesota is just not a defense that you fear. The Bears are going to be able to move the ball, so a low-end option, guy who's almost always going to rank around 15th for me each and every week. After that is Trey Burton, disappointing game against the Ravens. He should be more involved going forward, especially this week against Tennessee, which is an easier defense, but at this point, again, a pass catcher, pick up Pittman, pick up Trey Burton if you absolutely need to, but you don't really want to be relying on anyone catching passes for Indianapolis. Finally, Jordan Reed. Disappointing first game, of course. He was activated off IR right before the Thursday night game. Everybody was really excited about him because you see what he does when he's healthy. I think he's going to likely produce now going forward, and they've got the Saints this weekend. But with George Kittle out, look, we've seen I can't remember too many times where we've seen Jordan Reed have a even remotely competent offense, be healthy, and not produce. So he'll probably produce, but you got to temper your expectations at this point. The guy has just, first of all, there's a better than average chance that even if he plays, he's going to be injured in like the middle of the game. All right, so that is something that you kind of need to accept. Could happen coming into it. Like, that's just what it is. He could leave the game injured when he gets into it. So again, he's a guy who you pick up, but I would kind of temper expectations a little bit as I'm looking at going forward. More than you got Thursday, but not crazy. All right, halfway through. Thank you for sitting with me. Are we ready for questions? We're ready for questions. Let's get through it. From Jose Yu, Matt Ryan's on a bye. Should you pick up Tua, Teddy, Carr, Locke, or Goff? So if all those guys are available, I mean, I mentioned Tua, but Goff would be my guy this weekend against Seattle. I mean, you just saw what Josh Allen did, right? Nuts. Goff probably shouldn't be available, but in a 1 QB league, fine. Goff is your guy. I have not done my rankings yet for week 10, but I strongly suspect that Goff is going to be the guy against Seattle. From Stelios, do I drop AJ Green for Tim Patrick? I would not. Now that AJ Green is staying put in that offense, I think there's enough volume to support 3 wide receivers, and I think there's a little more upside with AJ Green. So, it's a poor analogy, but, moving deck chairs around on the Titanic. Your team's not the Titanic, Stelios, I promise. But still, it's something where, when guys are in the same tier, I'm going to stick with what I got. Probably you said, should I drop Tim Patrick for AJ Green? I might have said yes, but I probably just would have said whatever. Doesn't really matter. From Jay, New York, should I pick up Jordan Reed or Irv Smith in full PPR? I would pick up Jordan Reed. Irv Smith, look, he caught the 2 touchdowns, but those were his only 2 catches for 10 yards. I never bought into this whole thing. I know he's running a lot more routes, but he just doesn't have the volume that you're going to feel comfortable. They don't have a great matchup against Chicago. Minnesota is not going to be piling on the points in this game, so I just don't see a huge game for Irv Smith. I would rather go with, for lack of a better way to say it, the devil I don't know, and that right now is what Jordan Reed is going to look like this year. So I'd pick up Jordan Reed. Again, not crazy excited about Jordan Reed, but he certainly offers more upside than Irv Smith. From Max Miller, any news on David Johnson? I'm going to look at my phone right now to see if I got a notification about it. I've got nothing. Nothing. Sorry. No news on David Johnson. But I would, again, pick up Duke Johnson for sure right off the bat. Don't even worry about it because that is my number 1 pickup. From Kevin Stokes, should I pick up Dallas Goedert or Austin Hooper for tight end? So Austin Hooper is my number 1 pickup, but that is assuming that Dallas Goedert is owned here. Okay, so for me, it's Goedert. Goedert is the number 1 pickup for me going forward without question at tight end. I think I have him ranked 8th rest of season. That's just going to be higher than Hooper. So I would rather go with Goedert there. For AB, should I pick up Curtis Samuel or Mike Williams? I haven't seen a status update on Mike Williams yet. I don't know. He left the end of the game with a minor injury, so I'm not exactly sure where his status is at. So both those guys are basically going to rank relatively the same for me rest of season. So for me, 6-1, half a dozen of the other. I would probably pick up Mike Williams just because I think that his overall potential is a little higher given where we are with the Carolina passing game. I mean, you've already got the 2 other wide receivers who are heavily going to factor in. Justin Herbert has no problem pushing the ball down the field, no problem targeting Mike Williams, pardon me. So if he is good to go, he is my slight preference. So I would go with there. From Liberty Finder, kickers, Sanders, Crosby, or Forbath. Look, I have not done my kicker rankers yet this week. If you're looking rest of season, though, Sanders. Dude never misses. Stop arguing with it. Just go with Sanders. From ARJ, anyone have any info on Mixon or Sanders? Will they be back? Somebody may have commented in it. I do not have any information because it's only Tuesday. I'm sure we're going to find out Wednesday. I'm expecting both to be back. I have minor concerns about Mixon just because a foot sprain that I didn't hear anything about. No time frame from it other than you went from week to week to day. That doesn't do much for me. Okay, so I'd like to hear something, but coming off a bye, considering he's now missed a couple of weeks, I'm going to assume that both are going to be back. But I haven't heard anything yet. Things did sound at least somewhat positive on, over the bye for Sanders. So I'm more confident in Sanders, but I expect both of them to play this week. For Francisco Daza, is Dallas Goedert a good option at tight end in week 10? So there's a lot of Dallas Goedert questions. I'm not sure whether or not he's available. I'm not sure whether or not fantasy managers are just comparing him to what if they think that he's going to be somebody who, they can either pick up or they should start over other options on their team. But yeah, you're going to start him against the Giants. Dallas Goedert, for me, the way I'm looking at him going forward, is somebody who you're just starting. Rest of season. End of story. That's it. Put him in your lineup. Get him out there. Good to go. So for me, Dallas Goedert is going to be a fine start. My guess is I will rank him as a top 10 tight end in week 10. From Jim Class, Dan, when you're alone, do you still clap to sync sound and video? I do, actually. Clapping to sync sound and video is one of my favorite pastimes. And so I will just do that sometimes when I'm sitting by myself. I hope you guys appreciate just how many podcasts and videos I have been doing this year and how often I have forgotten to clap and sync. Okay? Just totally forget. Doesn't matter. I can do 7 podcasts a week. 1 or 2 of them I completely forget to clap and sync. I don't know why, man. I'm just not that bright, but it's a ridiculous amount of time. Let's get to Taco. We just traded DK, Goddard, Connor, and got back Michael Thomas, Aaron Jones, Fant in a PPR keeper league. How did I do? There's a lot of people going on here, but I am going to say that that's a pretty fair trade. I would lean towards your side that you got back just because I think Michael Thomas, as good as DK Metcalf is, Michael Thomas is probably the best receiver in the game, despite the fact that he's been dealing with injuries. Aaron Jones and Connor is at worst a wash, but really I prefer Aaron Jones. And Goddard and Fant, both solid options. But it's pretty much an even trade, which is kind of funny that, you're just kind of trading pretty much people in the exact same vein. I talk a lot about that where, seems strange to trade exact same positions for the exact same tiers. But yeah, I slightly prefer your side. From Matthew Wood, Nick Chubb is on the waiver wire. How much of my fab should I spend? 100%. Even if it means you can't pick up anybody else. 100%. It's ridiculous. Nick Chubb's going to be a top 8 back rest of season. 100%. From Kaniska Curling, is David Moore Seattle's version of Christian Kirk? No. No, he's not. David Moore is going to produce on occasion. He's going to catch a touchdown. It's fine. But Christian Kirk is more like a wide receiver 3 that you can throw out there. And he's getting more targets now. He's getting more involved. David Moore is always going to be kind of stagnant where he is. He's going to have good games, going to have bad games. But he's not Christian Kirk. And he's not really somebody who can rely on in fantasy circles, whereas Christian Kirk certainly is. Johnny Cardenas, do I drop Devin Singletary? You know that the answer is never spite drop, right? I mean, everybody kind of knows that the answer is 100% never, ever spite drop. But with that said, I would have no hesitancy about dropping Devin Singletary if I need to make a pickup. When are you ever going to feel comfortable starting Devin Singletary? Is it going to take a Zach Moss injury? No, because we've seen what it looks like with a Zach Moss injury, and it doesn't really matter. This is not something where we get too excited about. So, yeah, you can probably drop him. Is it possible that Devin Singletary will get back into a point where you feel comfortable starting him each week? It is possible, but it's not something I'm going to rely on. So, you're fine to drop Devin Singletary, but again, don't spite drop him. Wait to see if you have better options. Michael Z, should I trade CMC away? There's never a right or a wrong answer. Should I trade X player away? See what the value is that's out there. It's very frustrating, I understand, to own Christian McCaffrey right now. Comes back, finally, monstrous game, immediately hurts his shoulder or his ribs, I guess is what they're calling it. Whatever they're calling it at this point. I think his shoulder. I don't know even if he's going to be out this week. See what you can get, but I wouldn't trade him away unless I'm comfortable that what I'm getting back is something really substantial. From Matthew Schott, would you package Travis Fulgham or someone to pick up Miles Sanders with the expectation to grab Rager off the wire? Look, Fulgham, the fact that it's Fulgham doesn't mean anything. I think both Rager and Fulgham could easily have value together. I don't think Rager coming back is really going to take away from Fulgham. So I would, if I could trade Fulgham and someone else to pick up to get Miles Sanders, probably. I mean, it really depends on what range we're talking about. Fulgham, to me, rest of season is a wide receiver 2. I feel comfortable with that. So if you can trade a wide receiver 2 and another wide receiver 2 type player, wide receiver 3, somebody like that, for a running back like Sanders, I'd absolutely do that. But again, I wouldn't be like Rager's coming back. It's going to seriously negatively impact Travis Fulgham. I don't see that happening. I think both are going to be able to have value. EB4I, should I drop Gus Edwards for Mark Ingram? This is the patented Harris Paul Rudd GIF shoulder shrug. Yeah, whatever. I mean, probably not. I'm not going to feel great about starting either one of them. And if Mark Ingram is healthy, I just can't imagine I guess what I'll say is I think you're going to need an injury to somebody to want to start either one of those guys. Right now, you've got the injury to Mark Ingram, so you were willing to maybe start Gus Edwards. With Mark Ingram back, you're not going to want to start any three of them. If you get Gus Edwards having an injury, then you might want to start Mark Ingram. So 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. It's basically how I feel. Patrick K, should I trade Leonard Fournette for Lamar Jackson? You have Hunt, CH, Mostert, Murray, Williams as running backs. Well, you're strong at running back, so you can certainly do that. I think Fournette for Lamar Jackson is completely fair value, and I'm not really relying on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers situation anyway, so I'd be fine with that. I don't know who your QB1 is right now anyway, and Lamar Jackson is at this point just a low-end QB1, but I have no problem with that deal whatsoever. From Francisco Macia, is DJ Moore droppable? No. I, again, understand the frustration with DJ Moore. I'd like for him to see more targets. I'd like for him to have more receptions, but no, he's not. I mean, he's not going to be the most reliable guy. He's moving closer and closer, and probably is right now, actually, in the wide receiver 3 territory, but he's still not droppable. There's somebody in your league who will take a shot on DJ Moore. So I would search out that fantasy manager and do that. From LACB, should I trade Hunt for Kyler Murray? If you're in a 2 QB league, sure. If you're in a 1 QB league, I won't kill you for it. I still wouldn't do it. I'm gonna write the trade chart article later today. I will have Hunt worth more than Kyler Murray, but it's not an insane trade, especially if you're struggling at quarterback. But you can mostly stream your way there, and I think Kareem Hunt's going to be a pretty solid RB2 rest of the way. If you did it, I wouldn't kill you though, because it is looking like Murray is going to be kind of this year's, not quite Lamar Jackson, not quite Patrick Mahomes in their primes, but still with his rushing ability, he's pretty elite. From Sunny, what's your take on LaMichael Pirine? Is he valued more than waiver wire pickups you mentioned on your podcast, Wilkins, McKissick, or Breida? No, he is not. He is on my waiver wire list, but he is behind Matt Breida, Joshua Kelly, Ahmed, Cam Akers, Kalen Ballage, Ryan Nall. What have we seen that suggests that the Jets are going to turn it over to Pirine? Frank Gore gets more carries. He often gets more snaps. There may be a game or two where Pirine factors into the passing game. It doesn't really matter, though. There's just no way you're going to feel comfortable with Pirine. So, no, he's way below, only if you're absolutely desperate at running back. From John Val, what do I do with J.K. Dobbins? What is his bench value? I mean, I think you can drop Dobbins if you want to. Here's the bottom line with all the Ravens running backs. You can drop any of them. You really can, because the only way any of them has value is if at least one of them is injured. With Ingram down, Dobbins was okay, Edwards was okay, but you weren't really going crazy to start either one of them. They're kind of desperation plays. So, yeah, I really would be fine to drop J.K. Dobbins, and you run the risk if there's an injury that he's going to provide a ton of value, but you're probably going to need 2 injuries for that to happen. So I'm fine dropping him and moving on. From 25, should I be hesitant to start Terry McLaurin with Alex Smith at quarterback? No. I mean, I realize that his touchdown came on crazy breaking tackles, but he did still score a touchdown with Alex Smith. Zero concerns about Terry McLaurin. You want to drop him a spot or 2 in your rest of season rankings, fine, but start him without question. Joel S., trade AB and Austin Hooper for Tyreek Hill and TJ Hawkinson. Yeah, that's a no-brainer. You're winning both sides of that deal. You're winning Tyreek Hill, and you're winning on the TJ Hawkinson. So do that trade without question. From Johnny C., do I trade James Robinson and Amari Cooper for Dalvin Cook? I've got no problem with that deal. I mean, Dalvin Cook has a really tough closing schedule, but I'm fine with that. But Robinson's also great. I just don't have that much faith in Amari Cooper. So I'm okay to do that. You're getting the best player in the deal. It's not a huge win or anything like that, but I'd be okay to do that in this situation where you're getting the best deal. For Sal S., do I drop DJ Dallas for Mike Davis? Yes. DJ Dallas has at most one more week of value in a tough matchup against the Rams. And my guess is you're going to see one of Carlos Hyde or Chris Carson come back here. So I would be fine to do that for a running back like Mike Davis, who's going to have value this week, even in a tough matchup, but possibly longer than that. From Brandon Gagnon, should I trade Tyreek Hill for Aaron Jones? Standard League, very fair trade, need-based. I would prefer Aaron Jones in a vacuum. So, yes, you should. From Julian M, who can I realistically trade Zeke for? So, Julian, don't take this the wrong way. But I hate that type of question because it really, really depends on what your league sort of says. And I talked about it today with Brandon Funston on our podcast and Yates, and their value of Zeke is kind of the same, but you can see some people valuing him as a strong RB2, some as an RB3. Some people want nothing to do with him. In a 2-quarterback league, okay, I understand, for a bye week, I legitimately saw Zeke dealt for Phillip Rivers last week. Legitimately. Okay? It's a 2-quarterback league. Fine. And the guy was desperate for a quarterback because he couldn't fill a second QB spot that week. But still, you don't know. Just put him on the block. See what you can get for him. If you can get anything high-end RB2 value or better, I would. But he is a guy who's still going to have 20 touches roughly. So there is value there, even though it's been frustrating. So don't give him away. From Mary Moore, should Seattle try to get Dan Quinn? Sure. I mean, they were better, but yeah, that defense is a mess. From Louis V, is any wide receiver worth a pickup from the waiver wire to replace Devontae Parker? Look, if Preston Williams is going to miss time, Parker has more value. I might prefer Jalen Reagor to Parker rest of season, depending on where we are with Williams, but I'd probably just hold Parker at this point. Again, it wasn't a terrible game from Parker. I certainly thought that he wouldn't have nearly as good a game, so I'd probably hold. Rager's in the same range, but I'd probably just hold Parker. From Jacob Glazer, should I drop Antonio Brown? His next 3 matchups are garbage, and he has a bye week. No, don't drop Antonio Brown at all. He's going to be fine. You don't really worry about the matchups at this point with that offense. I know they were terrible, but they'll be fine. Brown looked healthy. You know, I know where it is, everything like that. My producer is reminding me that Big Ben's start Sunday is in jeopardy. He has to isolate for 5 days. I know. But again, same thing with Matthew Stafford. So long as he doesn't have a positive test, he's fine. So I'm going to assume that he is good to go for now. From Dwayne Bacon, what's Jonathan Taylor's role going to be? I'm a little more optimistic on Jonathan Taylor going forward. I value him as an RB2. I think that Indianapolis is going to realize that their offense cannot run through Jordan Wilkins, and Taylor will get more of a role going forward. It's a great schedule. There is risk, but I would hold him if I had it. From Travis Elkins, would you pick up Reagor or AJ Green? That's pretty close. They're right in the same range. I'd probably lean Green, but I've got no problem if you want to go Reagor there. They're both close. I'd probably lean Green slightly. From Christopher Ellis, do I drop Hunter Henry? Christopher, for who? I know it hasn't been pretty, but it hasn't been pretty for all but like 6 tight ends. Yes, Hunter Henry is a disappointment, but who are you picking up? If you want to drop him to pick up Austin Hooper, I mean, I prefer Henry rest of season, but I'm not going to kill you for that. You can do that. I mean, it's just not that pretty at tight end. So I'd probably just hold Hunter Henry at this point, but I get it. From John Hancock, what should I do with Mark Andrews? My very kind producer would like me to remind everybody that I had Mark Andrews as one of the bigger players to avoid at his ADP, and that there were very mean YouTube commenters on that video after week 1 when he had a huge game. This is just a reminder to A, not be mean to people who give you advice, and B, don't take victory laps too early. I don't know, man. I mean, this is, again, it's tight end. I'm still starting Mark Andrews if I have him, just because I can't see dropping him for a waiver wire guy, and I want to go bench. Who exactly am I going with at this point? So I'm still just starting him, and I'm pissed. That's basically what I have. But at tight end, there just aren't that many, great options. Kenneth King, should I drop David Montgomery for Reagor? No. David Montgomery is an unexciting RB2, even if he's going to miss this week. Still got to roll with him. Do not drop a guy like David Montgomery. No. Worst case, you got to get rid of him. You want to clear a spot, trade him. Somebody will give you something. A guy like David Montgomery is worth a lot. So don't do anything crazy like that. From DFWAV Solutions, why is no one talking about Josh Reynolds? 8+ targets the last 2 games, and he's going against the Seahawks. Super sleeper. So, if you're talking about Josh Reynolds as somebody who, you might want to start this week as a desperation, okay, I'm fine with that, but it's Josh Reynolds. I mean, you're still not going to completely trust him when you've got other options like Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods. But I'm fine with him as a super sleeper, man. I'm not killing you. It's fine. From Jet Jacobs, should I trade Gurley for Jacobs? Yep. Don't hesitate. Do that immediately without question. Gurley's value is going to go down. He's got tough matchups against the Saints. He's incredibly touchdown reliant. So definitely do that. Corey Woodman, hey, D-Block. Hey, man, just traded Henderson for Edmonds. Am I dumb? No, that's fine. Edmonds is certainly going to have at least another week of value, maybe two. And Henderson, I don't think you can really rely on confidently. So I'm okay with it. In the same range. DB, should I drop Hunter Henry for Austin Hooper? I just said I probably wouldn't, but you're fine if you want to do that. I understand the frustration with Henry, so you're okay to do that, but I probably would not. From Evan Doyle, are you high on Zach Moss? No, but I think Moss is fine and can be rolled out there as a borderline flex each and every week, but I'm not high on Moss. I'm higher on him than Singletary, I will say that. Caleb Kennedy, who should I be selling high on? DJ Chark. So I'm not saying, or should you sell high on DJ Chark, or who should you get for DJ Chark? Sell DJ Chark as high as you can. I have Chark as a wide receiver 3. If you can get there based on this one giant game, then do so. He's still going to be someone who you can start, but if you can sell him for like wide receiver 2 prices, I would do that. Kenny James, should I trade DJ Chark for the Ravens defense? I have wide receiver depth. No, do not ever trade for a defense. Just don't. Just don't. Just stream your way. Hold DJ Chark. Trade him for somebody else if you want to. From Pablo Ramos, pick up Locke or Tua. I have Mahomes on a bye. They're going to be ranked really close again. For week 10, I don't want to go crazy because I haven't locked it in. You're going to be able to start either one. I probably would just pick up Tua. But check my rankings. I'll post them overnight. But they're both close. You can't really go wrong. I'd probably go with Tua there. From Johnny C, do I drop Devin Singletary? As I said before, you absolutely can. So don't worry about that. From Rick Thornell, keep Ebron or get Goddard in a standard league. I prefer Goddard going forward. Ebron's okay, but I do prefer Goddard. I have him as a top 10 tight end rest of season. From Ugly Dude, is Brady done? No, Brady's fine. He's 43, okay? If you're 43, see if you can go out there every single week and have a good game. The Saints are a very good defense. They're underrated. They're underrated. They came to play. Didn't have a good game. He'll be fine. So he can still start him each and every week. Dwayne Bacon, is Richie James a good option or was it just a one-game wonder? One-game wonder. Don't worry about him. I think Brandon Ayuk is still on the COVID list, but you're going to have no, I'm sorry. I think Kendrick Bourne. My apologies. Kendrick Bourne is still on the COVID list. But you're going to have Ayuk. You're probably going to have Deebo Samuel. I wouldn't be worried about Richie James. From Brian Phillips, is Mike Williams a viable pick up and play this week? If he's healthy, yes, absolutely. You can start him. Hunter S., any news on Miles Sanders? Not that I've heard of, other than the early word was pretty optimistic that he was going to be able to go this week. So I'm planning on him going, and I will rank him as such. From the Cat's Pajamas, would you pick up Goff and play him over Burrow and Newton this week? So I'll make it clear again. I haven't yet done my rankings yet for this week, but I think so. I think I may have Goff ranked higher. They're all going to be in that range, but I think I may have Goff higher. Again, I don't want to. I haven't done my week 10 rankings yet. I can't do them until at night on Tuesdays because of the trade chart and because of this stuff. But Goff is a fine pickup, I think, over both those guys. Corey Woodman, you should call this Fantasy Football. Thanks for tuning in to Fantasy Football. We'll catch you next week. DB, are there any Dolphins running backs worth picking up? Nope. If it's not Myles Gaskin, I don't really want to go near anybody. Look like Matt Breida might be the guy, but who knows now what he's dealing with his hamstring injury. So, no, I'm avoiding everybody on that team except for Myles Gaskin. From Quarterboy 2, what are you thinking about DJ Chark? Was it a fluke? Probably. I mean, it was a very soft defense, especially without Roby, so it's not going to be quite as easy. And I think with no book on Jake Luton, he probably did better than he otherwise would. But Chark was a guy we were drafting as a wide receiver 2. He's got talent. If you target him and you give Gardner Minshew a pass, he couldn't feel his hand, so the targets weren't there. So I would hold DJ Chark if I could. If you can, quote-unquote, sell high, I'd be fine to do that. From MK, should I drop DJ Moore for McKissick? No, do not drop DJ Moore. Hold him. Find somebody else to drop. I know it's frustrating, but again, he's got enough draft capital at this point still. You know what he can do in that offense. You're still holding him. Eric Sagata, should I drop Jared Cook for Alexander Madison? Full PPR, not a Cook owner. If you have another tight end, I'm fine to do. Madison should be owned, regardless of if you are a Cook owner. So if you have another tight end, I'm fine to drop Jared Cook, who's just in that range of streaming tight ends at this point. From TCP, should I pick up Gesicki or Burton for this week's standard? Again, I have not done my rankings. My guess is Trey Burton's going to rank a little higher, though. From Christopher Butts, do I burn number 1 waiver priority on Austin Eckler in a standard league. I've got Zeke, Sanders, Dobbins, and Taylor 5-4 record. I'm a little concerned that we may not see Austin Eckler again this year, but I would probably burn my number one waiver priority because the upside is there, especially, if you're looking, you're 5-4, so you're in the playoff hunt. I probably would do it. I also don't hold my number one waiver priority like it's gold, like some people do. I'm willing to waste it a little more. From Magic Mike, better handcuff the stash, Carlos Hyde or Devontae Booker? I guess Booker. Carlos Hyde, I mean, you've had like 2 chances, Carlos Hyde, to really do it, and you have missed both games, so I'm not there. Devontae Booker looked explosive. Jacobs has clearly been battling the knee injury, so I would be fine to go with Booker there. Barkong, Matt Ryan's on a bye. Pick one. Phillip Rivers, Locke, Luton, Mullins, Cousin. I'll go with Locke there. I don't love Drew Locke necessarily, but it's still something where for this week, I would be willing to take the shot given the matchup. From Neri Lopez, CH on bye. My running back situation is a mess. Pick up Gallman or McKissick. Either one is fine. I mean, I'd probably just go with McKissick for the safety because we want to see where we are with Devonta Freeman. So I'd probably just pick up McKissick to get the guaranteed safe touch-up. From Left Coast Kicks, is Madison droppable? No. Hold Madison. If there's another injury to Dalvin Cook, I know Madison disappointed, but you would be starting him pretty regularly, so I would go with that. From Tim Falconer, would you trade James Conner for Michael Thomas? I have Conner ranked higher than Thomas, weighted more in the trade chart, but if you're desperate for a wide receiver, I'd be okay with it, but I would prefer Conner there. Eric S., full PPR, trade away Deshaun Watson and Chris Godwin for Patrick Mahomes and Deebo Samuel. I'm okay with it. I'd probably prefer the Watson and Godwin side just because I don't have as much faith in Deebo Samuel, particularly without Jimmy Garoppolo, but it's a pretty fair deal. Chandler Russell, trade Chase Claypool and Myles Gaskin for Chris Carson. Yep, I'm okay with that. Not crazy value, but I am okay with that. You're getting the best player in the deal. From K, is it time to drop Justin Jackson? I would still hold. If he did get injured, it's a minor injury. Hopefully, if he's back this week, he might be somebody who you would start, so I would hold Justin Jackson. From Rufus Tanner, after his bye, is Hurst an every week starter rest of the way? Yeah, low end, but yes, I think you can start Hayden Hurst pretty much each and every week to the extent you can start any tight end each and every week. I do think that he's gotten himself into that category. From Isaac Baker, should I trade Chubb and Claypool for Jacobs and Ridley? Yes, I would do that. The upgrade from Claypool to Ridley is certainly worth that deal, so I would do that. From J Gaming, would you pick up Mike Williams or Jalen Reagor? Again, they're in the same range, but I'd probably pick up Mike Williams, I guess. He's shown already what he can do. So long as he's healthy, I'd want to see some positive health reports from him. From Julian M., I got offered James Robinson and Robbie Anderson for Zeke. Do it. Do James Robinson for Zeke straight up. Okay, you don't need Robbie Anderson. James Robinson for Zeke is a win for you. If you're getting Robbie Anderson with it, do it before you even get off this live stream. From EB4, trade CMC for Kelsey and Chris Carson. Yeah, I'm fine to do that at this point with his injury. Kelsey is he's the only tight end who really is just on a completely other level. From George K, which running back can I drop? Gallman or Freeman or both? Probably both, but I would just drop Freeman because I don't expect him to have independent value. I think Gallman's got enough of a role now going forward. And if Freeman is out, you know what Gallman can do. From MP, should I drop Jonnu Smith for Goddard or Hooper? Oh, man, I would probably just hold. I'd probably just hold at this point. I would hold Jonnu Smith. I love Goddard, and I like Hooper. I wouldn't drop Jonnu Smith, though, for Hooper, but I'd probably just hold who I've got. So that's where I am there. From Mateo, who should I drop? Who should I trade Josh Jacobs for? It's got to be a high-end running back one. I mean, the answer is pretty much nobody. So no wide receiver is worth Jacobs really other than Devontae Adams. So I would just hold. But if you can get a top 5 running back, go ahead and do it. From Vince Gosford, should I trade Gronk for Rojo? Probably not. I mean, it's fine. If you can have somebody else at tight end, I would be fine to do that. But it's not something that I'm going crazy over. But sure, that's fine for the upside. But you can't start Rojo right now. From King Mud Kips, what do you think about Cam Akers? Look, he's just not somebody who I think is going to be able to have value absent him, absent at least 1 or 2 injuries in front of him. So I'm not dying to pick him up. So that's where we are. Guys, thank you very much for tuning in. Click the like button, click the subscribe button. I really appreciate it. We will be back next week with both me and Yates. 2 people I know is better than 1 on this one. But I really appreciate you coming in, and we will talk to you next week.